Well, good morning. Granny Gear here for Old Guy on a Bike. Wasn't that Monty Python saying that said now for something completely different? Whoever that was. That kind of describes today, because today I am riding a bike that is, well, if not completely different, it's certainly not what you're used to seeing. But maybe, if this catches on, you'll be seeing more of them. All right. All that after the break. Roll intro. Today I'm on a super gravel bike. Now I don't mean it's like a gravel bike, the super, I mean it's literally being called super gravel. As in, well, the gravel bike on steroids, or is it a fast mountain bike with drop bars? Whatever it is, whatever you want to call it or label it, Cougan is a mountain bike brand that is part of the Basso family. You know Basso from the road bike I've been riding. Italian brand, Italian owned, family owned. Cougan started in America as an American brand. I'd never heard of it, but it did. And now it's owned and has been by the Basso family. So Cougan is their mountain bike line. And I'm riding the Innova Super Gravel. Let's talk about that. First of all, just divide this up into a few sections. I'm going to try and keep this brief, but I got a lot to talk about, so bear with me. Talk about the bike itself, a little bit of features on it, not a deep dive, but enough to understand what's going on with it. Talk about what it's like to ride. We're going to talk about my thoughts on the genre, because this isn't unique in that it's not the only one I've seen like this. So we'll see if we'll see more of this from manufacturers, but we're certainly seeing bikes like this from DIYers, do-it-yourselfers coming out of bike shops and garages. And then we'll talk about who this bike is for, who do I think it's for, and is it for me? Because as you well know, you may know, I already did my own mountain bike drop bar conversion, but for a little different reason. All right, let me find a place on the trail here, get over this little bump in the road, woohoo, and yeah, let's go talk super gravel, shall we? Okay, change of venue. Back in the canyon there where I was filming, we had this big old flock of ravens. Man, they're noisy, and I don't mind little sounds of nature. That was redonkulous, you know what I'm saying? So we'll have to put up with the little honking of the geese and splashing of the fish, and we'll see if we can make that work. Meanwhile, back to the super gravel. So what is the bike? Well, basically, if you took a 100mm forked, carbon fiber framed cross-country mountain bike with a soft tail configuration built into the frame, and you put a 2.25 tire on it, and you gave it, let's call it moderate mountain bike geometry by today's standards, and then you took and you put a drop bar on it, well, pretty much you've got the super gravel. And that's pretty much what Cougan did. They took an existing bike in their lineup that really had some ideal attributes to it for this type of conversion. It's not too extreme in geometry. It's got a 69-degree head tube angle, which by mountain bike standards is pretty steep. That's static, so you know when the fork compresses, it's going to get more toward what, well, kind of some of the gravel bikes are today. It is pretty light. This bike weighs 24 pounds pretty much, with pedals on it as you see it, and cage on it and whatnot. Run tubeless. It takes up to a 2.4 tire. They say these are 2.25s. I don't have a whole lot of room at the back of the frame at the chainstay. So yeah, it might fit, but there wouldn't be a lot of room. I wouldn't want to do that in the mud. So also on the geometry, looking at the bike, it's not extremely long in the top tube. It has a fairly short reach, so it would come as a mountain bike with a little longer stem than most mountain bikes do these days, which are generally very, very short. So when you put that all together, it's actually a pretty compelling bike to do this type of conversion with. So the unique feature of the bike is what they call ISS, which I believe is Innova Suspension System, something like that. And basically, the frame and the back of the frame, seat stays, chain stays, do not have a pivot in them per se. They're designed to flex through what is called, through what is claimed about 30 millimeters of potential travel in it. And it has a little mechanism, you can see it here, that has little oil damped, I don't know if it's really a cartridge, but little devices inside here. I'll show you like the video here from their website. I didn't take it apart. And it gives you a little bit of give in the frame and a little bit of comfort, which for a gravel bike application, I guess even like a lightweight cross-country mountain bike, that's not a bad thing, but probably even more so for a gravel bike. And so when you put this all together, the super gravel, or whatever you'd like to call it, well, it seems like it was a mountain bike that was a really, really good candidate putting drop bars on it. But that all said, how is it to ride? Well, basically, if you've ever ridden in a pretty efficient pedaling, carbon hardtail-ish mountain bike with a 100 millimeter fork on it, well, it's kind of what it feels like. In other words, down the road, it's pedaling just fine. It's not terribly slow or anything. It's certainly not as fast to respond as my gravel bike is. As far as like getting out of the saddle and accelerating, the gravel bike is much snappier in that. You can feel the weight of it. You can feel it feels very long compared to my gravel bike. And you know, it's a pretty big tire and wheel combination is just heavier. But that said, it ain't bad. It rolls along just fine. You get it up to speed. I got no problems with it. The little Innova system on the road, it's pretty transparent. I can feel it cycling just slightly, but no more so than, say, if I had my pro level Redshift suspension seat post on it. It kind of feels about like that, or maybe even not quite that compliant. Get it in the dirt, though, is where it really starts to come together, and obviously this is not a road bike. And here's where the difference between this and any gravel bike I've ridden, even with like a 50 millimeter tire, really starts to be apparent because, well, basically it's a mountain bike, isn't it? It's just a fast mountain bike. It's an efficient type of mountain bike, 2.25 tire, 100 millimeter fork. That little Innova system is definitely doing something for me. It's kind of dulling the bumps a little bit in the saddle and out of the saddle, right? Whereas suspension seat post only works if you're seated on it. The little Innova system, it just feels like your tire maybe has less pressure on it than it does. And so, well, that's not too bad. And in the dirt, like in this deep gravel section of road, I could just feel the bigger tires working for me. It's floating through it. It's staying true to course. And basically what happens is the rougher it gets, well, the better this gets. In other words, a mountain bike on smooth dirt is probably faster than this is, right? It's lighter. The tire is just going to be scooting along. It doesn't need to be a big tire. If the dirt is hard, that doesn't really matter. And there's probably no advantage, maybe even a disadvantage. But you just start taking the scale and you going up in technicality where the dirt is getting worse or loose or bumpier or more technical, steeper, deeper, etc. Well, this just gets better and better, and then it starts to really pull away from, well, any gravel bike that I've ridden at least. Basically, you're riding a mountain bike, except it has drop bars on it. And let's talk about that for a second, because these conversions don't always work terribly well. What I noticed with the Innova Super Gravel is when the position that they put it in, which is a 44, I got a measurement, I think it's a 44 centimeter bar. And with like a 90 or 100 stem, so it's not too extreme as far as being a wide bar and a short stem, which you would see more like on a bike packing conversion like this, okay? On gravel roads, on fire roads, 20, 25, 30 mile an hour fire roads, I mean, you know, it's so much more confidence inspiring than any gravel bike I've ridden. The faster you go, the rougher it gets, well, the better this is. And so on rough fire roads where the gravel bike starts to be, you know, there's underbiking, right? And then after a while, after a long day and long hours, now underbiking may not be what you want to do anymore. Well, that's where the Innova Super Gravel is really pulling ahead. Where I didn't like it so much was on single track. And I'll show you this video here. I did a couple trails that I filmed. I did a bunch more trails than that, but I filmed these. The first trail, I am having a heck of a time keeping it going where I want it to go. I don't know what was going on exactly. I didn't feel like my weight was in the right place. I couldn't tune into the bike. I was really struggling with it that day. Now the second single track, I moved my weight back a little bit. I was tuning into the bike a little bit more, and I was going actually much faster. If this was mine and I was riding it in technical places, like I wanted this to be my drop bar mountain bike where I do more single tracky and stuff, I'd shorten the stem and I'd widen the bar. Okay, that's what I would do, because I think that would get me a little bit back, a little bit more leverage, and it would slow the steering down a little bit, and I think that would improve that. However, for fast fire roads and like the Jeep road, the open road, double tracks, things like that, where it's not quite so twisty turny. Now then, well, what is this bike good for? Now what about this whole genre of these drop bar monster gravel, super gravel? To me, I know it's not as sexy a word. It really is, as far as I'm concerned, a drop bar mountain bike. Why is that? Because they took a mountain bike and they put a drop bar on it. So you can give it whatever kind of name and spin that however you want. What about the genre? How does this relate how does this relate in the marketplace? Like, in a way, what you've made here is a kind of a crummy mountain bike, okay? Because you took a lot of that moto feeling that makes a mountain bike great when things get more technical and the scenery gets blurry, right, or it gets steeper or whatnot. And you kind of took a little bit of that away with a drop bar, right? If you're riding it from the hoods, well, that isn't the best place to be going fast down a technical trail, no matter what the bike is designed like. And if you go to the drops on this bar, that puts me too low. I really couldn't use the drops on this on single track. I was way too low and too far forward. Trying to get out of the wind, maybe like on a long fire road or a long dirt road, that would probably been okay. But really, I rode this from the hoods. So in a sense, it's not a very good mountain bike in that way. Well, is it a better gravel bike? Well, I don't think it is for most people. In a sense, you've made it heavier, a little slower, in the way that gravel bikes are lighter and faster. And so really kind of this genre is not a great mountain bike anymore, and it really isn't necessarily, to my way of thinking, a great gravel bike. And is it for yours truly? Well, let's look at the inspiration behind this type of bike to begin with, because these weren't done by the major manufacturers. They were done by people in shops and garages who had an idea and said, you know what, where I'm riding is a little bit rough for a mountain bike, and maybe what I'm doing is this ultra endurance race. It's 3-4 days long and it's very rough, it's very demanding, and yet I want the aerodynamic efficiency and I want the extra hand positions over long days on rough terrain that a gravel bike with a drop bar gives me. But man, there's something, if I could just combine the two. And so really that was what happened. People kind of Frankenstein bikes, kind of like I did with Project Curly. And they retrofitted a mountain bike, a fast mountain bike with a drop bar. And for something like, the Silk Road race, or there's all these things that are like 3 or 4 days, the Atlas Mountain Race, 3 or 4 days or whatever it takes for you to do it. And sometimes the gravel bike just isn't enough. Well, that was part of the inspiration. And then you saw some of the gravel pros like Keegan Swinson and others, where they were taking in for something like the Leadville 100, which is very, very fast, relatively smooth a lot of the time. And they said, you know what, I could be more aero if I had a drop bar bike, but I really do need a mountain bike for this ride, because there's things like power line and stuff like that gravel bike makes no sense at all. So they did that for speed and aeroness, and people said, oh wow, if Keegan can do it, well, I can do it too. So who is it for? Well, if for some reason you're in that world where you're like, gee, I wish I had a little bit more than a gravel bike, but I appreciate what the drop bar does to a mountain bike, as far as like aeroness and whatnot, well, this bike makes a lot of sense. Outside of that, well, there's a word. I'd call it niche. And if you're outside of that niche, if you just don't want this for your own reasons, I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense. What about me? Well, I just kind of answered that, didn't I? Now, here's the thing. I thought that something like this, in the past, I've thought about a bike like this and thought, man, I think that would work really, really well for me, because I got these like long, rough, unmaintained fire road rides. It would also maybe have some pavement to it, and that idea of mixing that bigger tire and a suspension fork and the capabilities of the mountain bike along with the drop bars, man, that could just be really right up my alley. Unfortunately, that alley, it turns out to be a dead end. So no, I don't really think I want this. I think if I was going to go next level on my gravel bike to the point where I'm underbiking a little more than I want, honestly, for me, something like my Cyclosis or an NV Mog or the Santa Cruz, what do they call their gravel bike? That's a good one to put up on the screen. If you put a 50 millimeter tire on that, and I could put like a 40 millimeter travel gravel fork, I do think maybe, I haven't ridden a bike like that, but I'm guessing that might be the right alley for me. And if I want to have more than that, well, honestly, I would just ride something like this with a flat bar. That's my thoughts on the Lee Cougan Innova Super Gravel. It's not a bad bike. It's actually really kind of a good bike, I think, in its category. Now, whether you fit in that category or not, that's up to you. All right, you guys have a great week and or weekend. And as always, well, go ride your bikes.